Hello and welcome to another episode of Aphantasia Experiments. I almost forgot the name of my podcast here because I am recording this on my phone as I drive in stop and go traffic. And I realized as I pressed record, that was distracting to me, that my recording is 111. Like the recording number is 111. Random, angel number. So what am I going to talk about today? I feel just inspired to just throw something out there. I am currently reading a book by Dr. Wayne Dyer. He has so many books, so many lectures and whatnot out there. He is just a wealth of wisdom, and I find a lot of the stuff that he's saying in this book extremely inspirational and also validating to, my experiences podcasting in particular. At one point in this book, actually, you know what? Honestly, I don't even know if it's in this book or if it was in a lecture I just listened to. I do this. I double read people sometimes. I'll read two things at once. Anyway, so I've been listening to a lecture from him. So was it from this or from the book? I don't know. But I'm reading a book called I Can See Clearly Now. That's what it's called. But he has so many books that are so great. But he was talking about how when he does these lectures, he used to put on these lectures that like 20 people would come and it would be $20, and then those people told people, and then it turned into 60 people, and then those people turned into 1,200 people, and then bada bing, bada boom. He's like a best-selling author, and there's like a ton of synchronicities that kind of led him to be who he is and who he no longer is. I mean, he's no longer with us, but he has impacted people and will continue to impact people beyond his life for many, many, many years to come. And the ripple effect of his teachings will be around for centuries. So he's pretty incredible. But the thing that he was saying about when he did these lectures was he wouldn't have anything like written down. He might have a topic or something, but he would just go in with the intention, like the good intention, like the heart-led intention of like helping people. So the things that, and you can tell in the lecture that I was listening to, he goes on like random tangents, and I'm like, holy crap, that's exactly what I do. I tell stories and I go on tangents, and I'm not saying, this is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm Wayne Dyer or anything like that, but I think there's some value in just speaking from your heart. Things come out, you don't always have to plan it, but if you know that you're speaking from your heart, that passion and that intention can reach lots of people. So every time I get an email from someone saying, oh, you said this and it touched me in this way or whatever, or that validated experience for me, or oh my gosh, this synchronicity happened or whatever, I always think, okay, I am having an effect on people. This is big. This is awesome. And my philosophy going into this was like, if I can reach one person, if I can say something that helps one person, then, my life has meaning, and I've never not thought that my life had meaning. But, so every time I hear from someone, it makes me feel good. And when Wayne Dyer said that, I was like, this is what I've been doing. This is what I love, is to just speak about what I've learned and see if anyone else feels it too, So he's talking about in this book the detriment, not the word. I don't think that's the word. How terrible things can happen if we kind of live in this group mentality. Basically, if you just go along with the way the world is going and just like follow in line, like a soldier, just go and do what you think is the right thing, like what society thinks is normal. If we all just did that and we all just like blindly followed rules and blindly followed, I mean, shit can happen. And he talks about World War II and the Holocaust. and how he ended up living in Germany, and he felt like compelled to like figure it out and learn about, the Holocaust, because this wasn't that long ago. And he was explaining that he was born on the day that World War II started. And so he felt compelled to understand and learn about, what happened during those times. So we went and talked to different people from Germany, and everyone just was like, we just went along because it was like we were told. It was the rule. It was like people were just blindly going because of fear. And all these people were living in fear and blindly just accepting that this was what they had to do. And nobody stood up for anything because everybody was living in this like group mind mentality. And so it's so important that we have our individual thoughts. Like, we all have our own consciousness and our own brain. And I think that we are all connected. There's a deep connection, like strings that connect us. But I think we have our unique own minds for a reason, and that we need to like always tap into that and always like listen to our heart and mind, and not just like blindly, follow rules. And especially when we know in our soul that they aren't right, Do you really think that all of those German soldiers who like blindly went along with stuff, do you really think each one of them was like, yeah, I want to kill people, children, There's no way. And I'm sure that they were traumatized for years and years and lifetimes afterwards. But, when you're scared, when you're acting out of fear, and it's like millions of people are acting this way, they're all coming together and acting the same way, it's hard to steer off from that. But it's a scary thing to think about, that people, when they forget or they stop using their own minds, how awful things can really happen. So this is my message to you, to encourage you to tap into your own consciousness and your own higher self and higher power, because there are messages, there's guidance that is waiting to come to you, that you just need to listen to and detach from that group mentality. So that's what I'm getting from this book. I hope it's not too annoying, my audio here. I am driving in traffic and it is raining, so if you hear a pitter patter, that is why. What else did I have to say? It's a very interesting book. And I'm just going to tell a couple stories about some stuff that's been going on with me. So I think I've mentioned on the podcast that at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the fall, so like the school year, my father-in-law passed away. And we developed a really nice relationship and bond, especially talking about spiritual stuff. We talked about, crossing over and what that might look like. And he struggled with, a lot of stuff. I think that a lot of people struggle at the end of life, and there was a lot of stuff that he was unsure about that I helped kind of guide him through and whatnot. And he told me before he passed that he was planning on visiting me and communicating with me after he crossed. He had a very deep belief that spiritually that he would be able to do that, and that I was the person that he would be able to communicate with, because I'm open. And this is a whole other topic, being open. So the week after he passed, there was so much stuff that happened. I'll get into some of it. So I was having lots of dreams about him. I had a lot of times I would do meditations and he would come through and I could feel him. And there was one point, and I was relaying all this stuff to my husband, who is not very spiritual, but he was coming through so strongly that I couldn't not communicate with my husband. And if you're in a situation, I think that this happens a lot, that people are in relationships, especially when you're going through like your own like spiritual awakening, and you're in a relationship with a partner who isn't going through the same thing you are. I mean, how lucky would that be that you go through the same sort of awakening together, or you realize you have the same profound realization at the same time? It doesn't happen always, right? So my husband hasn't been spiritual at all, hasn't really leaned into any of that stuff. He's just kind of watched me from a distance, like, completely change, and not even change, like, just lean into stuff that I already knew. And, like, I feel like I had these massive moments where I just couldn't continue to live like a sheep anymore. I couldn't continue to, like, fall in line, you know? I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I made some major life decisions and changes with his support, but not the same, like, not a spiritual support system, right? So where I'm getting at with this was, I had all this information coming in from his dad, but my husband is not really that big of a believer, you know, but he did witness my father-in-law tell me to my face, I'm coming to you. So in the week and month following his death, when his dad would come to me, I felt like I had to communicate that to my husband, even though it felt extremely, extremely uncomfortable. So what I did was, I think the first night after his death, I told him about the dream I had, where he was telling me that he was experiencing all the things that he hadn't experienced in life because of his debilitating anxiety. He had some brain injuries, and he wasn't able to leave the house much. He was what's it called? Not a hypochondriac, not a hermit, but, like, he had hit his head, and his brain injury was so bad that noises and people and everything was just so hard when he left the house. So he didn't leave the house a lot. And so in this dream, he like flashed me through all these things that he missed in the last, like, 10 years of his life. And he showed me that he was able to, like, re-experience those experiences. And so I woke up in the morning and I told my husband, and I could tell that me sharing that with him, it helped. And it was hard for me because I was like, he's going to think I'm crazy. This is insane. It's like, he died yesterday. Like, this is a lot, blah, blah, blah. But it helped. And, but then after, I had so much more stuff come in. So much more. His dad was so strong. And I felt really, I love my husband and we're so close. But for some reason, this situation was so uncomfortable for me to share what I was getting from his dad. So what I did was, I know I've talked about this many times before, I voice note all the time, right? I text with friends, and that's how we have conversations. Instead of getting on the phone and having a conversation, because it's hard with timing and schedules and whatever, we just send voice notes, and sometimes they're 5 minutes, sometimes they're 15 minutes. But we send voice notes and then respond whenever. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that with my husband, because then I don't have to look at his face and his reaction, because it makes him uncomfortable too. He wants to hear it, but he doesn't know how to react, or, you know, he doesn't know how to smile. I can tell it makes him uncomfortable, and he doesn't know how to react. So I would have these crazy dreams or meditative experiences where his dad was coming in so strong and so loud, and I would wake up and I wouldn't even tell my husband. I would wait till he went off to work, and then I would send him a voice note and be like, this is what came through for me. I'm just going to say it, and, you know, we can talk about it later if you want, but this is what came to me. So I would ramble, and then that would be it, and I would leave it, and then he would come home, and sometimes he'd be like, oh, blah, 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 thanks for sharing that. But what ended up happening was, and I didn't even know that he had done this, was he took all my voice notes and he relayed it to his mom, who I didn't feel comfortable sharing this stuff with yet, because she was so deep in the grieving process, and you just never know who's going to believe you or whatever. But it really helped her a lot too. So I'm sharing this with you just because sometimes we want to share things with people, but it feels uncomfortable and hard. But I feel like all you have to do is try to find the best way to do it. and do it only if you feel like it's coming right from your heart, in that place of like caring, not like, oh, where else would it come from? Like an ego driven place. Like, oh, I want to make $1,000 being a psychic medium, so I'm going to make up a story about whatever. I have no idea why you would do that. But if you have information coming into you and you feel you need to share it, just find a way that you feel the person can receive it best, and like ask, do you want to hear this? My husband, I knew he wanted to hear it, so I didn't feel like I had to ask that. But if it was like a random stranger, I'd be like, listen, I get a lot of information coming to me during meditations and dreams. I had some stuff come in about you. If you are interested, I could share it. If not, totally cool, whatever, but finding, the most comfortable way of doing it. Maybe you have to like get over that barrier of that uncomfortableness. But for me, in my situation with my husband, I feel like it was the best way of doing it because he was able to sit with it, and it didn't have to be a conversation. He could listen, absorb it, digest it, share it with his mom if he wanted to, and that was that. So the reason I'm sharing this story is because yesterday I drove up to a competition for my daughter. My daughter's a power tumbler, and we had a competition yesterday, the Ontario Championships, and my mother-in-law came with me. My husband couldn't come because my other kids had other stuff going on, and it was a long drive, and it just didn't work out, so I just went with my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law, we were chatting on the way home, and I absolutely love when she brings up my father-in-law because I feel like it's an opportunity that we can like really connect and talk about, the afterlife and signs, all of this fun stuff that she's really into. And she feels comfortable talking to me about it after Kevin, like my husband, shared all the stuff I was getting, right? So she ended up writing down all the information I got. I don't even remember half of it because it was so much. But one of the things that I got from him was meatloaf. He came and he was like, I'm going to, meatloaf is going to be something, like a sign for you from me. It's going to come in multiple ways, but just pay attention to meatloaf. And I was like, that's so weird. And yesterday on my drive home, my mother-in-law was talking about how she's been getting lots of signs from him. Like, he had told us before he died that he would send the smell of burning leaves in the fall, because that was like a smell to him that was a positive memory and reminded him of camping and whatnot. And so he said that would be like his sign for us. So every time I smell fire, I'm like, oh, hi, Jim. I say hi, and I know that he's there with me. But he's come through in so many other ways. So my mother-in-law was telling me, she's been talking to him, and she'll smell smoke because he was a smoker. And she'll hear random noises at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she's like, is it him? And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, try talking and try communicating and see what happens, and blah, blah, blah. Anyways, we're having this deep conversation about signs, and I told her, I'm like, because I bought her the book Signs by Laura Lynn Jackson, which, by the way, if you're grieving in any way and you want to have some sort of relationship going forward with a loved one you've lost, this book is a complete game changer. I talk about signs and stuff a lot on the podcast, but if you haven't read Laura Lynn Jackson's Signs, it is like one of my, hands down, one of my favorite books. I've read it so many times. It's also one of the books that I give as a gift often, and it just changes everything. It changes how you have relationships with people after they die, and I think that if you knew that you could have that death itself wouldn't be as scary. Your people have fears of dying, right? Because everybody dies, and it's scary, it's unknown. But if you knew that you could still have a relationship, with your family once you're gone, it's less scary and less daunting, right? So I definitely highly recommend that book. So I gave it to my mother-in-law, and we were talking all about signs in the car. And I said to her, I'm like, do you ever ask for a specific sign? Because I know, like, there's universal signs, like cardinals and butterflies and hummingbirds and deer, that are all kind of like, these animals are on this electromagnetic field, so they're able to easier, they're able to help, like, communicate with us. And if you're thinking about your loved one, you see a cardinal, like that is like a universal symbol, right? But not everyone knows that you're capable of developing your own signs, and it can be anything. Like, it can be so random. So this is what my mother-in-law were talking about in the car on our drive home from the competition yesterday. By the way, my daughter got bronze, so no big deal. It's just a big deal. But as we were talking about this, it's like, it hits me. I'm like, holy shit. Sorry for the swear word. But Meatloaf is playing on the radio. And I said to her, I'm like, did Kevin tell you about Meatloaf? And she was like, oh my God, yes. I'm like, he's playing right now. That is insane. Like, we're talking about signs. He told me Meatloaf was going to be a sign. It was clearly him saying, like, yeah, I'm here with you. And I was telling her, too, because my father-in-law didn't want to leave the house much. Not that he didn't want to, but he didn't feel capable of it. He was a social man when he was well. The life of the party, and then all this stuff happened, and he wasn't able to be that person anymore. So I said to her, I'm like, it's hard not having his physical body here, but I really believe that he was with us today. And, at every competition and every, like, meaningful event, he's always there. And he wouldn't have been there. He wouldn't have been able to be there if he was still alive. He really wouldn't have, because he couldn't leave the house, right? So, and if he was still alive, she would have been taking care of him and not been able to, come to these competitions with me. And my daughter was an alternate to go to this Eastern Canadian tumbling thing. And my mother-in-law was, like, all on board. She was ready to buy a ticket for Newfoundland and, like, go with us. And if that had happened, a year ago, there's no way in hell she would have been able to come, right? So I think that, not that it's a blessing that he's gone, but I think that and I think this happens a lot when people pass, they're able to be there for us more than they could have been when they're sick and dying, right? And if we can try to develop that relationship after they're gone, it's such a beautiful thing, and it can completely change your life. So, yeah, I think that's all I'm going to talk about today. Is this a short podcast? I don't know. I was stuck in traffic. I felt like I had to podcast. It's only 23 minutes, but I'm almost home, and it's the weekend. My kids are home, and I'm not going to be able to talk anymore, so I'm going to end that here. I hope this resonated with someone. I don't even really know what I talked about, but I was kind of channeling my Wayne Dyer, because Wayne Dyer just comes on, talks through his heart, sees what happens, and that's what I did in this episode. Legit nothing about aphantasia. Sorry about that. But I'm going to talk more about Reiki and stuff about that later. Actually, I had a conversation with a friend about Reiki and intuitive healing just this morning. And because I keep wanting to do this experiment where we do Reiki and intuitive healing and see if there's any difference. But I really feel in my heart that energy is like a universal thing, right? Like, whatever you call energy healing, if it's Reiki, if it's intuitive healing, it's just energy healing. We are all made up of energy, and the healing process can look different, but also have the same impact. So you can call it different things. And, and energy can be healed in multiple ways. So energy can be healed with song, energy can be healed with sound, energy can be healed with touch, energy can be healed with intention. Energy can be healed with, visualization, which is hard when you have aphantasia. But I think that the intention of, like, say you had a tumor in your stomach, the intention of, like, dissipating that tumor, or like learning the root cause of that tumor, whatever, it's the intention. And there's a multitude, like a bunch of different ways that you can go about treating that. And the other side to that is, we die at various stages in our life, and sometimes you get cancer at 34, and it sounds like it's an unfair thing, but sometimes that's our soul's journey, and that the impact of the death of a loved one, or the sickness of a loved one, is actually what propels us forward in life to do other things, or to change things, or to have a different perspective. And if someone, dies at a young age or suffers from something, it's part of our soul's journey, as hard as that is. And if you have the knowingness, which I have the knowingness now, which makes life it makes life easier to deal with, because death happens all the time, and struggle happens all the time. But if you have the knowingness that life continues, and that it's a journey of learning and growth, this life, the next life, our soul's evolution, and that our relationships with people, the souls that we meet in this lifetime, continue after death, it makes the blow of losing people a little less. It doesn't go away completely. It just helps a little bit in that you can continue a relationship and continue communicating and loving and receiving love, especially receiving love from our loved ones who are gone after they've passed. So that's my ramble. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you for coming. You didn't come. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening. That's probably the thing to say. Thank you for listening. And if you feel like reaching out, my email address is rofocreative@gmail.com. Stay tuned for more inspirational wisdom. And maybe next time I'll talk more about aphantasia. Have a great rest of your day and life. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.